You should check out the entire site before your glider even comes out of the bag. Have a quick look over the back of the ridge, look for broken glass, barbed wire, bits of metal, anything that could injure you or damage your glider. Always remember, due to the relatively strong wind you are flying in on these sites, it's very easy to get blown over the ridge. Most of all, be aware if there are power lines behind the ridge. These can be very hard to spot if you're already in the air. And finally, watch out for people on the beach, especially small children. Also things like dogs, radio-controlled planes, and kite surfers can ruin your day. Gear. The two most important bits of gear that you should never fly without are your helmet, preferably full-faced, and some form of back protection fitted to your harness. The thicker the better. Strong sunnies, good boots, a flight suit, and gloves can also save you a lot of skin, especially if you land in the bushes or rocks. Any clips, carabiners, etc. that can lock themselves onto your glider lines should be avoided, not just for dune flying but for flying in general. Even lace hooks on boots have caused accidents by snagging lines, usually when you don't need an extra problem. The other thing you should think about before you fly is how many gliders are already flying or about to be sharing the site with you. If there are going to be a few of you flying, you should understand that although ridge rules are usually in place in a perfect world, the reality is that all of the gliders will be sharing a very narrow lift band and will often be flying very close to you at different speeds. Ridge rules are often overlooked in favour of staying in the lift band. I tend to give way to anyone who needs the lift more than I do. Just make sure that you make eye contact and the other pilot knows exactly where you're going to go. The most important thing to remember is that no one has the absolute right of way. You should avoid a collision at all costs, no matter who is right or wrong. Always leave an escape path for yourself and try to let other pilots know before you turn in front of them or overtake them. Be a bit wary if you are sharing the ridge with hang gliders. They fly much faster than you do and their field of vision is quite different to yours. Where the lift comes from. As the wind approaches the ridge, it is forced to flow up and over it. The resulting compression of air generates a lift band. This narrow corridor of air will support a paraglider if the wind is strong enough and coming from the right direction. A long, steep, unbroken ridge will create smoother, stronger lift than a smaller, flatter, ragged ridge. When you are flying across gaps or deep gullies, you should try to fly forward, away from the ridge. The airflow compresses and accelerates as it passes through the gap. This can drag your glider behind the ridge line, making it very difficult to get forward again. The direction of the wind in relation to the ridge also greatly affects the amount of lift. The best lift is produced when the wind is exactly perpendicular to the ridge. The more the wind is angled to the ridge, the less lift it will produce. Turbulence. One of the phenomena associated with any wing is wake turbulence. Wake turbulence is dirty air streaming backwards from the wingtips of your canopy. It's a common problem to almost anything that flies, from jets to seagulls. You can't really feel it affecting your own glider, but if you fly too close, downwind from another glider at the same height, you can feel a large shudder go through your own wing. In some cases, it can even trigger a collapse. If you're flying through wake turbulence, you will usually lose a bit of height, only a few feet. but it's something to be aware of if you're already scratching or are top landing at the time. Rotor is another form of turbulence. As the air flows up over the ridge, it starts to form waves of disturbed air behind the ridgeline. This is not usually of any concern unless you're top landing well behind the ridge edge or you have already been blown over the back. Trees, buildings, etc. at the bottom of the ridge can also generate some pretty ugly rotor. Remember not to top land downwind of these obstacles. If you're flying in crosswind, be aware that not only will the amount of lift be significantly less, so will your upwind speed. Your downwind speed will be much faster, and you could encounter areas of poor lift and even rotor, resulting in a bad crash. If you are flying quite low, especially on a downwind leg, it's a good idea to drop your legs out of the harness and get ready for any quick unplanned contact